I think that we've been too polite for too long with the politicians who caused this mess. My common sense plan is to use the federal spending power in order to get the local bureaucracies that block housing construction out of the way. So what I will do, what I will intend to do is link the federal dollars that cities get for housing to the number of homes that they actually allow to be built. So we will require municipalities permit 15% more home building per year as a condition of getting their federal money. If they beat the target, they'll get a bonus. If they miss the target, they will pay a penalty. And it will be strictly proportional. So if they beat the target by 10%, they'll get 10% more money. If they miss the target by 10%, they'll get 10% less money. In other words, we'll pay them like realtors and builders. Realtors are paid for the number of homes they sell, builders for the number they build. We should pay municipal governments for the number of homes they allow to be completed. That way, the bureaucracies will have an incentive to speed up and lower the cost of home building. I will also, for future transit projects, I will be putting the money from the federal government in a trust. The city will have to get bridge financing to build the transit station. And the money will only be released to them when all of the available land around the station is surrounded by high-density apartment complexes that are occupied by people. I'm not going to be building new transit stations with federal money so that we can have parking lots and brown fields with tumbleweed all around them. In Hong Kong, they have the only profitable transit system in the world. Why? They sell the air rights right over the station. So the developer actually pays the cost, happily pays the cost of the transit station for the privilege of having 100 stories above it, so that people can get on the elevator, go to the bottom, jump on the train, leave late and arrive early to their destination. But here in Canada, we have I've gone to them, there's even in Vancouver, enormous parking lots and empty spaces around stations. In Winnipeg, the local councillor has been sued because he blocked 2,000 homes right next to a transit station which was built for those homes. And yet the federal government coughs up the money. I was just at a big parking lot in Pointe-Claire, Quebec, right next to a station that was supposed to take future students to McGill University, but the local mayor said his constituents want to keep the parking lot. They don't want to have apartments there. So there's a big empty parking lot for a shopping center that is in low demand, right next to a multi-million-dollar train station that was supposed to take young people to McGill University. I would say to Pointe-Claire or Winnipeg, you're not getting the federal money until you get the permits and there are apartments built right on site. We're going to sell off 6,000 federal buildings and thousands of acres of federal land to build, build, build. And if you have any doubt that this can be done, if you have any doubt that when you remove government, you can get things built, look what the Squamish have done right here in Vancouver. They're building 6,000 homes on 10 acres of land. Why? Because they don't have to go through City Hall. They're on a reserve, right? Imagine if our cities ran like the Squamish people run their communities. Imagine if Calgary was run the way Susina is. Susina is far more business friendly, far faster to approve projects than the bureaucrats at Calgary City Hall. Same is true here in Vancouver. The First Nations are going to be leading the way as the most enterprising communities in this country when I'm Prime Minister, and I will ensure that they are richly rewarded for their entrepreneurial talents. And this is one example, just one example, of how much we can build when we get government out of the way and say yes to positive development for our people. And it's necessary for our economy because, as I mentioned, we're spending 9% of GDP on residential investment, twice the OECD average, in order to build fewer homes. What that has corresponded with is a massive drop in business investment. So what is happening is that as Canadians have to spend more on artificially inflated costs for real estate, they've had less to spend on productive business investment in patents and mines and factories and other income-generating assets. So business investment today is lower than it was in 2014, in part because real estate costs are literally sucking up all of the savings. Over time, economists will tell you savings and investment equal each other. The question is, where does your savings go as a country? Ours has to be sucked up by real estate because it's artificially expensive. So instead of making that extra RRSP contribution, which then gets invested in a business, that family has to spend the money on an artificially inflated mortgage payment. Well, imagine if we made housing affordable, they could then put that money into investing, or maybe saving up to start a future business that would increase the productivity of our country. We need to increase productive investment in our country. Today, the Canadian worker gets 53 cents of investment for every dollar in the U.S. Think about that, 53 cents on the dollar. We wonder why American wages are outstripping Canadian wages so massively. Think about it. You've got two workers. One of them is getting $1 of investment for every 53% his competitors gave. The 53% worker is going to be falling behind in tools and technology year after year. And it's not just the Americans. We get only 62 cents of business investment for every OECD worker. So that investment is lacking, and our workers, despite the fact that they are the best in the world, are losing out and losing wages, and no wonder they can't pay their bills. We're going to unlock the power of the free enterprise system, make Canada the fastest place in the OECD to get a permit, lower taxes, reform the tax system to bring home more production to this country, and productive investment that will mean more powerful paychecks for our people. But to do that, we need to fix the budget. Today, we see interest rates at 5%, which in relative to recent time is very high. 2 full percentage points are directly attributable to government deficits, according to the Scotiabank and its recent study. A group of Canadian economists recently calculated that the only way to bring down interest rates is to bring down deficits that are driving them up. Deficits, by necessity, put upward pressure on interest rates because they create more demand without creating an equivalent supply. That demand then pushes up inflation, which forces the Bank of Canada to push back down in the opposite direction. Our politicians, our central bankers, and our financial system has debauched our currency under Justin Trudeau. We've created, our money supply. This is coins, bills, and bank deposits, or M2, has gone from $1.8 trillion to $2.4 trillion in the last 3 years. That's a 32% increase in the amount of cash in our economy, during which time our economy grew by 4%. In other words, the money is growing 8 times faster than the stuff that money buys. That doesn't make us richer. Money is just an accounting system. It's the technology by which we transfer value over space and time. It isn't the value in and of itself. If you have an economy with 10 apples and $10, it's $1 an apple. You double the number of dollars in the economy to 20, but you still only have 10 apples. You're not twice as rich. You just pay twice as much for the apple. And that's why we have the inflation we have today. And all of that money supply growth has been because of government deficits, excessive government spending. The cost of government is over 70% more than it was just 8 years ago. And most of that has been funded by borrowing and therefore printing and growing the money supply. As the John Manley, the great Canadian finance minister, a liberal. God, you wouldn't have expected, James, that I would be praising a liberal on this stage, would you? But he was back from the common sense era of liberals, right? There used to be a common sense consensus between liberals and conservatives on these matters. He said what's happening today is that Justin Trudeau's government is pressing on the gas pedal of inflation while the Bank of Canada is forced to press on the brakes. So here you have the vision of a federal government sitting in the parking lot simultaneously slamming both its feet down, one on the gas, one on the brakes, and the engine is about to blow or the brakes are about to come undone. That is the economic contradiction we have. So our common sense plan as Conservatives is to bring in a dollar-for-dollar law that will require my ministers find $1 of savings for every new dollar of spending. We will get rid of the $35 billion infrastructure bank that hasn't completed a single solitary infrastructure project. We'll get rid of the so-called Green Fund, $1 billion, $150 million of which has already been